Okay, so how does a garbage company that posts satirical memes win best online news source in Regina? That is the question on a lot of people's minds after Prairie Dog Magazine released the results of their best of online voting competition. One of the comments that stood out to us was from a person who wrote, "If it wasn't for Just Bins, I wouldn't know any news happening in Regina." And that got us thinking about how many people rely solely on memes and social media reels to get all their news. Is that you? You can call us at 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Well, if you are listening right now, it means you probably are not one of those people. News is still available, as it always was, on the airwaves, on TV, in your local paper, and on the websites of news organizations. However, back in the summer, Canada's Online News Act, Bill C-18, came into effect. The law required big tech companies to compensate media organizations for the content being freely shared on their site. Meta, the company behind Facebook and Instagram, chose instead to block Canadian news from their platforms instead of paying money to media organizations. And so if you've tried sharing any links to Canadian news sites, you'll see that you can't do it. A message will pop up saying, "This post can't be shared." Patricia Elliott is professor of investigative and community journalism at First Nations University of Canada. Before that, she taught journalism at the University of Regina for 20 years, and we caught up with her yesterday.
Hi there, Alicia.
Thanks so much for being with us. There's so much to talk about here, a lot to unpack. Before we get too far, though, I feel like we do need to explain to people what Just Bins is, because for anybody outside of Regina, or if you're not on social media, you may have no idea what we're talking about. So what is it? What is the Just Bins Facebook account?
Well, I follow it. It's some funny memes, little hits of information. It's not a journalism site, obviously. And, I get why it's popular. Like City Hall is just like a hot mess these days here in Regina, and there's been some scandals in the Sask Party government. So they spend a lot of time poking fun at politicians, which is something that professional journalists can't do. They can, but it's not journalism. And I would say for that follower who says, "Oh, I only get my news from Just Bins," like just to take a reality check on that. Because you have to ask yourself, where does Just Bins get their information from? And they get it from news reports, obviously, in a lot of cases. Like you have to wonder, they've been posting a lot about Tim Reid of Real. And like, how do they know about his contracts and his salary? Unless they're camped down at City Hall, unless they did their own independent investigations. They got it learning. They learned it from listening to the radio or reading the news, probably a CBC report. So that's the hard work of journalists. And Just Bins kind of takes those news reports and makes a funny meme about them. And if you took away that work of journalists, Just Bins would be, awfully short of news to share.
Which is kind of, we've seen this. There's other examples of this. You could talk about late night television and how they take headlines, or how Saturday Night Live takes headlines and then there's a spin on it, right? That makes us laugh. And people, they do become informed in some ways through laughter and through, comedy bits that poke fun at the news, right? So it's not an entirely new concept, but at the same time, there are a lot of things going on here. So I first want to ask you about how, I think there's a lot of chatter right now about how it has won best online news source through the Prairie Dogs contest, which is, it has always sort of been a bit of a popularity contest. But why do you think it won in that category?
Well, like I said, it's they poke fun at politicians, which you're not, and there's an appetite for that right now, and you're not going to see that from more serious online journalism that actually does the job, because professional journalists can't do that. And, they also pick up video, like just by being around town. Like I saw their video of the car crash at the Cornwall Centre. So they had some video and a little cut and paste of a police report. But if you want to say that you're a journalist, then you would need to spend the rest of your day like finding some witnesses, getting some footage from inside the Cornwall Centre, contacting the mall operator, asking the questions that are on the public's mind at the moment, like, are the stores going to be open? Can my kids still see Santa Claus? And then you have to look into the bigger questions to dig into, like, how is it that a vehicle is able to drive into a shopping mall? And how is that going to be prevented in the future? Because, there could have been people shopping, there could have been kids lined up to see Santa. And now that it's been shown to be possible, like, what's to stop someone from driving into a mall with intent to harm for this or any mall in the province? So that takes work, that kind of story. And for sure, I'm pretty sure there's journalists probably already digging into it. So at the end of the day, you're tired, but you're satisfied. You did the best job possible to get the information the public needs. And then you need to put your name and your face and your contact information on your report, because that's accountability. And so any person can barrage you with emails and stop you in the street and yell at you, So if Just Bins wanted to do that work and put themselves out there like that, okay, they're not doing that work now.
But they're sharing stuff, and CBC did follow the car crash into Cornwall Centre, and there are lots of journalistic conversations happening about whether or not to name the suspect. Will we follow it through the courts? All of that. But the reality is that Just Bins was able to post something on a social media site, and now with Bill C-18, people who are logging onto social media are not seeing any stories from Canadian news organizations. So how much is that a factor in all of this?
Well, they do say statistically that people's Facebook usage hasn't declined since the news ban happened. Meta made $10 billion sharing news content from Canada last year, so they don't deserve a lot of sympathy, in my opinion. And I don't know what anyone else's Facebook feeds look like since the ban, but mine just looks like garbage now. I do like seeing what my friends are doing, but the rest of it is pretty much junk. And if that was my only reference point for what was going on in the world, I would be so uninformed. And also so ripe for manipulation and misinformation. And to me, that's the sad part of the story. It's all kind of a laugh to a point when suddenly it's not funny anymore. And I can't help but notice, like, in that vote, the sort of bot trolls that vote attracted, and who have appeared in the aftermath of it, which have an agenda to make sure no one trusts any kind of rational, fact-checked information. And that's a danger.
Yeah, tell me more about that. The troll bots that you might be seeing. I mean, I've looked at the comments on the Just Bins Facebook page. I know what they're saying about traditional media sources, but what are you seeing, and what makes you think that they're troll bots?
Oh, because I recognize the posts from other places, right? There is a certain line, certain comments. Also, I check profiles whenever I see things I question. I check the profiles of so-called people, and you can tell, and some of them are like genuine, who also repeat this. To me, it's an agenda to sow mistrust and division. So I think it's incumbent on us to not just throw up our hands and say, we're not going to be spoon-fed by Facebook and Instagram, so we're just going to look at memes, right? Like, that's not responsible. That's like that movie Idiocracy. Like, do people really want to become idiots? Like, give your head a shake.
I don't disagree with you at all. But what we're seeing is that a lot of people are getting their news from memes. Why do you think that's the case?
They're not getting news from memes. They're getting memes.
Well, it's true, but they're okay.
News,
So
it's already been reported.
They're informing themselves through memes.
Yes. I mean, the news has already been reported by legitimate news organizations who work hard at it, who that's their profession. So they're not really getting their news from it. They are saying that's where they get their news from, but I don't believe that's their only sources. I'm sure most people do listen to the radio. They do go online and check out stories. I understand that Direct traffic to news websites has actually increased under the ban. So it's kind of a mantra, but it's a bit of a meaningless mantra. And if you are genuine that you never look anywhere but your Facebook feed, and you're looking at your Facebook feed right now, or your Instagram that has no news on it, then, like I said, that's just not responsible.
What about with bigger issues, like just moving away from just Regina and just bins, but people who are watching the war between Israel and Hamas play out on their social media? I see a lot. And whether or not it's misinformation or people with an agenda, I mean, that's for each individual to decide what they read into certain posts. But when something like a war is playing out on social media, what's the impact of that?
I think the impact is very disturbing. Because they say in war, the first casualty is truth, and you rely on journalists to break through that, and provide some truth and provide some eyewitness accounts. I think that's why, I'm glad that media organizations are going to the Competition Bureau and challenging the hold that Facebook has over the distribution of news in Canada, and in challenging the way this block has been instituted in a way that is, I think, harmful to Canadians and to their understanding of the world.
What do you think will happen, though? I can only speak from my own personal experience. And before the ban was put in place, I had to check myself because I was getting a lot of my news headlines through social media. And I realized there was an algorithm. And I thought, I have a responsibility here as a journalist, as a radio host, and as a citizen to look at my world through a lens that maybe is fact checked. That I went back to subscribing to newspapers, and I got rid of all of my news outlets on social media because I thought this is probably tainting the stories that I'm giving more weight to. So I personally made some choices along the way, and and people will do what they want. But how do you see this playing out? I mean, I don't think a lot of people are like me. I don't know if they went back to subscribing to a traditional newspaper. And yes, there's work happening right now to challenge Meta and to say maybe news organizations do belong on social media. But is this a massive disruption? And who knows how it's going to play out? But I'm wondering what you think. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think you set a really good example, Alicia. But I think you're right. Most people, sadly, don't seem to want to make the effort to inform themselves outside of their social media. I think it's very important to bring these social media corporations to a greater place of responsibility for the way information is shared and what information is shared. And that does take some government intervention around the world to challenge these corporations because yes, it's disruptive, and disruption is good. Disruption challenges the way we communicate and opens new channels of communications. But spreading misinformation, shielding people from well-researched information, feeding people's day with just kind of junk news or memes, that is not great for the future. It makes me worry about the future. And I hope more and more citizens start relooking at their relationship to social media and how it's forming their opinions, how it is giving them a picture of the world that is not very accurate, right? It's tunnel vision. It's a lot of misinformation.
I have one last question to ask you. We're going to be talking to the person with Prairie Dog Magazine, and to get into a bit more about the results of their best of voting competition. But do you have any final thoughts on the fact that a weekly newspaper, released these results, and do you have concerns that this validates some of the posts that Just Bins are making?
Well, if you put a vote out there, you have to go by the results. I think a little bit of a troll army jumped for the opportunity. It has happened. What do you do? Suppress it? I mean, are you in with Big Chickadee, right? The vote has happened. I know Just Bins, it looks like they probably rely a lot on the Prairie Dog City Hall coverage for information, for example. So they're taking advantage of the work of the Prairie Dog as well. You can't deny that there is an appeal and a popular appeal out there as well, for the reasons I mentioned. They're funny, they poke fun at people, not online journalism, not news, but
no, because some people are concerned with some of the posts that they're concerned with racism, sexism, and just some of the and perpetuating some of that in Regina as well. And so there's concerns that way too.
Yeah. I mean, you have to look at their whole content and the content and some of the people in their commenting section as well. There's not a lot of responsibility being taken for some of that content, which they need to take better responsibility. Right?
I appreciate having this conversation with you today, Trish. It's given me a fair bit to think about, so thank you.
Thank you.
Patricia Elliott is professor of investigative and community journalism at First Nations University of Canada. She's taught journalism in this province for 20 years. And one of the things Trish talked about when it comes to real journalism is accountability. So we did request an interview with Just Bins. Adam Snook, the owner and person who approves all of the content before it's posted. He did decline our interview request and said he prefers to post anonymously because it's easier to slag the city. Now, we want to hear from you on this topic. Since the Canadian news ban came into effect, how have you seen your Facebook page change? What is the effect of having social media accounts that are able to share news on Facebook and Instagram, but not any legitimate news organizations? Has the way you consume news changed? You can call 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. We got an email from Kevin in Regina who writes, "This is a very timely discussion. I just recently was visiting with someone who explained to me that they were canceling their cable TV subscription in favor of online streaming services because, as he put it, what do we need all that fake TV news for anyway? He also proudly proclaimed that he never listens to experts because someone is paying them. So he only listens to the 3% of experts who disagree with the other experts. Living proof that spending too much time in internet echo chambers will truly rot your brain." Well, in a moment, we'll be talking to author and activist Cory Doctorow. He has some pretty strong opinions on Meta and this place that we're currently in when it comes to social media. But next, our guest is Stephen Whitworth. He's the editor of Prairie Dog Magazine, the publication responsible for the Best of Regina Readers poll, and he's in our Regina studio. Stephen, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for being with us. You've been listening to our interview with journalism professor Trish Elliott. What stands out to you from that?
Oh, I thought it was a great interview, and she touched on a lot of really important points. Yeah, I mean, I think as far as Just Bins winning the Best of Regina, and I should say I'm personally responsible for allowing that nomination. Yeah, she really covered the bases quite well. So, good interview. I think she mostly nailed it.
Okay, so you did allow it. Tell us how the process works. How do people get nominated? Can someone nominate themselves?
Oh, absolutely. The Best of Regina contests for, I think, at least 5 or 6 years now have had 2 rounds. There's a nomination round and then there's a final round. The nomination round is just an open-ended kind of write in whoever you think should be eligible and who you want to see win for a given category. So in Best Online News, you'd have people nominate all the outlets in Regina that have online news. We would actually take ourselves out of that too. I think we always do that. So
no Prairie Dog it listed in the categories.
I mean, we do have some online news, but let's make it about other people.
Okay, but then the other people, one of them ended up being Just Bins. What was your reaction when that nomination came across your desk?
Well, my first reaction was I laughed. I thought that was really, really funny. Just Bins is obviously not news. Sure, they've broken the story of the downtown fires in Regina, but it's not a news outlet. But at the same time, we know, I mean, people should know what real news is. Apparently they don't all, but they should. And I think the majority of people who are engaging with news on any serious level know that. And I trusted my reaction that it made me laugh, and I thought laughing is okay. Even though it's not news, let's let it stand. We do this every year. We can mix it up a little bit. And so we went with it. And just bins on the first day of the final ballot, which is kind of like the highest nominees, the people or organizations that got the most nominations make it to the final ballot. Pretty much on the first day, if not the first few hours of that, just bins won best online news just with overwhelming support. And obviously that's because they tooted their own horn and they have a huge follower of loyal people who also thought it was really funny.
But
So
why'd you
hopefully
let?
I haven't broken media in Saskatchewan.
I mean, it's given us an opportunity to think deeply about this
Sure.
moment that we're in, and I appreciate that. But why did you let it stand? Why did you?
I have to go. Well, I have to go with my instincts when I think something's funny. But I understand that one of the reasons people turn to memes is because reality is overwhelmingly horrible in a lot of ways. It seems to be getting worse. There's climate change, there's wars, there's prejudice, there's I mean, for a lot of people, crime, there's government corruption. There's so much going on, and we have so much access to so much information. People's fuses are blowing and they're tuning out. So letting a little bit of something funny get through, is I think really important. And I literally forgot what your question was.
So that's
Sorry
okay,
about that.
because it's led me to another one. So yeah, sure, we can all laugh. We all need a good laugh. But does your award give some legitimacy to this account as a legitimate online source of news?
It might to some people. I wrote in the paper about the award, and I specifically asked asked our readers to remember to give love to media outlets with professionals and content that's vetted by editors and considered and fact checked, uh, because that's important. So with some people, maybe the award gives it credibility. I don't think it really does with serious people. I think you have to give them credit. So, we committed to fun. That's what we did with this decision. We wouldn't always do that, but you got to do that in this world sometimes, or you'll just break.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And I want to talk a little bit more about the state of things, and people are tuning out from news because sometimes the real life that's happening around us is tough. It's not great. Is that part of the reason why you also, not only do you do your best of polls, which tends to be a booster, and instills some pride in this city, but this year you also chose to do a worst of Regina. And that doesn't technically, I don't think that brings you in any extra money. So what was your
Oh, it
thinking there?
definitely does not.
So why'd you do that?
I had the idea, I think in the summer, and as soon as it popped into my head, I thought we have to do this. Obviously, when you're doing a best of Regina for decades, as we have, it's occurred to us before, but when it popped into my head this summer, I just realized, we have to do this now. The time is right. We're out of the pandemic, but we're not out of the pandemic consequences. And as I've said, there's so much stressful going on. I mean, I just think about how last summer we spent a lot of July and August breathing smoke, and that's headed towards being a new normal. And at the same time, people don't accept that that's a consequence of climate change, and they resist, fight, and criticize climate change policies. Just as an example of one thing that every moment of every day I worry about, and I think a lot of people worry about. So, there's just so much. The war in the Russian invasion of Ukraine was another thing that really upset a lot of people. And of course, after the contest got going, Hamas's raid into Israel, and Israel's response has just been it's wrecked people. So
So
it's time to talk about the worst of everything.
that's, yeah. I'm wondering overall what your final takeaway is, because you're the editor of a weekly magazine. You've been around for a long time. You've seen the shift in the media landscape. We're talking about social media and how people get their information, and we're talking about the world being really crappy. So what's your overall takeaway from how people are accessing information right now?
Well, I think I wish more people who are moving away from getting information and from legitimate news sources where paid people are responsible for using the skills that they've learned to give to to share accurate information. I really wish more people would who are turning away would stand up and do that. And I guess as far as just Bin's winning, it's a point of conversation. It's interesting to talk about, but the real the problems with Facebook censoring Canadian news, as well as not only censoring Canadian news, but pretending they're not, and pretending that it's the government censoring news. And there are even journalists who believe that it's the government, not the company
Not Meta.
behind the censorship. I was arguing with someone on Twitter, an American journalist the other day, who they read the Facebook announcement that they couldn't read a story because of the government of Canada, and right away they assume it's the government of Canada censoring things, and it's like, no, it's Facebook censoring things. So, please, if serious people need to do what they can to support news and to defend news when it's under cheap attack from people who benefit from misinformation or even enjoy perpetrating misinformation. News needs friends right now. The CBC and other outlets need friends.
Stephen, good to talk to you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
That is Stephen Whitworth. He's the editor of Prairie Dog Magazine. They do an annual online poll to determine their Best of Regina awards, and Just Bins took home Best Online News category this year. So it does beg the question, is the internet getting worse? It's something that Cory Doctorow has definitely contemplated. The Toronto-born author, activist, and big thinker writes science fiction, but he also writes about real life. And often, real life is just like a good old dystopian novel. Cory has thought a lot about how tech companies hooked us and got us to where we are. And so he's been listening to today's conversation, and I'd like to welcome you to the show, Cory. Hello.
Hey, it's nice to be back on. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. So you've been listening to this whole conversation. You don't live in Regina, but you've been part of what we've shared so far. And so what do you think of all of this?
Well, I think that all of this started from an understandable but unfortunate error, which was to assume that what tech is stealing from journalists is content rather than money. I don't think that it's bad for journalism for there to be easily accessible search results for journalistic materials, nor for it to be possible for people to talk about the journalism that matters to you, right? If you're not allowed to talk about the news, it's not the news, it's a secret. And so all of that stuff I think is fine and beneficial. And indeed, if it weren't, I think news outlets would be very happy with Facebook blocking the news and Google blocking the news and so on, because they would say, well, this is fine. They were just stealing from us and they're not stealing from us anymore. The reason that the media is angry at Facebook and Google and the other tech companies is because what's being stolen, and there is something being stolen here, is money. Historically, the intermediaries in an advertising market, so like the ad brokers and the agencies and so on, they were taking 10 to 15% out of every ad dollar. Facebook and Google, who are, like, not coincidentally a duopoly that's vertically integrated and controls like 90% of the display ads, they make 51 cents out of every dollar, right? If you process a credit card transaction, the incredibly concentrated monopolistic payment system takes 2 to 4% out of that credit card transaction. Apple and Google take 30% out of every transaction they process through an app, every payment, every subscriber dollar. If someone says, hey, I want to follow a newspaper, and then the newspaper piles into the platform to put their content there so that the people who want to read it can find it there, and then the platform turns around and says, unless you pay me, I won't show your content to your subscribers, that is foundationally different from just allowing people to talk to stuff. And it is an act of fraud on both the publisher and the news consumer, the reader or the viewer. And so I think that there are like lots of reasons to be very angry at the tech platforms. And there are lots of prescriptions for the tech platforms, things that we can do. Maybe we can talk about those as well that directly address the theft.
Yeah, okay. I do want to talk about the prescriptions for this, but I want you to elaborate a little bit further, because you have a term for all of this. That we joined something thinking it was free, that it was a way to connect with our friends, and then big companies end up wanting to monetize it. They charge us a fee. They're selling ads, all of that. So what's the term that you have for what you're calling platform decay?
Well, I assume the CRTC will let me say this, or you wouldn't be
Yeah.
asking me to. I know the FCC won't in the United States. So I call this enshittification. And enshittification is the process whereby a platform, which is like, we use that term all the time, but a platform formally, it's a business that sits between customers and other businesses. So like Uber sits between drivers and riders, or Facebook sits between publishers and readers. A platform makes a good offer to readers, to end users, offers them something that they like, finds a way to lock them in so they can't easily leave. In the case of Facebook, it's that all your friends are there. And so you might all dislike Facebook, but you like each other. And the process of figuring out when it's time to go and where you should go next is so complicated that you just end up stuck there. And then once people are stuck there, the platform takes stuff away from them. So, when Facebook kicked off for the general public in 2006, it made two promises. It said, we won't spy on you the way MySpace does. We are the non-surveilling social media network that will never spy on you. And they also said, we are only going to show you the things that you asked to see. So if you subscribe to a feed, that's all you're going to see. And so then you start to see the platform, once we're locked in, break those promises. So it goes to the advertisers and says, yeah, I know we told these rubes we weren't going to spy on them, but of course we're spying on them. Just give us some small dollars and we'll allow you to do very fine-grained targeting. And we'll just like pay a building full of engineers to provide ad fraud. So if you give us $1, that dollar is going to be well spent. And they went to the publishers and they said, yeah, we did tell these suckers we'd only show them the things that they asked to see, but also a lie. Just put excerpts from your website online, and we will, non-consensually cram that into the eyeballs of people who never wanted to see it. You put a link there, it'll be a traffic funnel for your website. You can monetize them however you want. And so that's stage 2 of enshittification. And once the platform has locked in those business users, it starts to steal from them too. So advertisers spend more to get less. The rates have gone up. Ad fraud has gone up. It's so bad that when Procter & Gamble zeroed out its $100 million per year programmatic advertising spending, they saw a 0% drop in sales, because like their ads just weren't reaching people. They're just being charged for nothing. And, for publishers, the platform just like dialed the knobs so that you had to put more and more content up, longer and longer excerpts, in order to be either boosted or shown to subscribers who had asked to see it, until you were finally like fully substituting your website on Facebook. And then Facebook, as kind of a coup de grace, said, oh, and if there's a link back to your own website, we're going to suppress this post because it might be a quote unquote malicious link. And so now they're charging you money to reach your own subscribers, the people who asked to see what you were putting there. And then, you get to this very delicate end stage of enshittification, stage 3, where the platform, it's drained off all the value. It wants to keep just enough value in there residually that everyone stays stuck to it. But if there's any additional value, it has to go straight to the shareholders. And that's so brittle, that equilibrium. And, one live stream mass shooting, one privacy scandal, one whistleblower, and people go from like, I hate this, but I can't bear to leave, to why am I here? I'm out of here. And then the platform starts to panic. And the technical term for panicking in the tech sector is pivoting. And so in the case of Facebook, they were like, okay, we're going to pivot. From now on, our mission is to turn you into a legless, sexless, low polygon, heavily surveilled cartoon character in a virtual world called the metaverse that we stole from a 25-year-old cyberpunk novel. And that's when the whole thing turns into a pile of shit. That's the final stage of enshittification. And that's where we are with Facebook, right? We're in terminal stage enshittification. And a lot of what we're trying to do with these platforms, like with the news bargaining code that we have, where Facebook's supposed to be profit sharing with the press, is to try and make it like safe for long-term perpetual dominance, right? To say like the goal of Facebook is for it to be just as profitable as it ever was, but share those profits with news, right? And that's like saying, we were talking about wildfires before. That's like saying the goal for people who live at the urban wildlife interface that burns every year is to make it safe to live there. But actually, we just need to evacuate those places. And we need to evacuate Facebook. There isn't a good version of Facebook, right? We need to make it easy to leave, not make it perpetually dominant, but share some of that money with the scumbag vulture capitalists from the United States who bought Postmedia, or the weird casino and cannabis bros who bought Torstar, or whoever else, right? What we want is to make sure that really quality media outlets, including small ones like Canada Land and the Observer and so on, that these media outlets are able to realize the full value of the advertising that they collect, and also not have 30 cents out of every advertising dollar stolen from them by a payment processor, from a duopoly of two big tech companies.
We have some callers, but I have one more question to ask you.
Sure.
So getting back to Just Bins, this waste management company that has increased its followers, that's doing all these strange things that have nothing to do with waste management. What's in it for them? Why would they be doing this?
I mean, I think that a lot of people somewhat correctly assume that so most of us don't need bin management, or don't know we need bin management. And when we finally do, when you move and you've got a lot of trash to throw away or whatever, you're just like, I don't know of any bin managers where bin management companies. So they're like, well, I'll just go for that one that I've heard of. And if they found a cheap way of doing it, that's fine. I did want to say, listening to the commentary about them, I think it's a mistake to reify journalistic institutions rather than journalism. Journalism is a thing you do, not a thing you are. And so, one of your earlier guests said, oh, there's a thing that Just Bins broke that was journalism. And that's fine, right? If they're doing journalism, that's fine.
They just reposted a video, though. They weren't doing journalism.
Okay, well, then that wasn't journalism.
They're the first to publish something, yeah.
And I think that there is value in there being places where other people's material is reproduced without their consent in order to comment on it, right? So like when the Toronto Star falsely claims that refugees are sacrificing goats in a hotel bathroom, we shouldn't need, or Toronto Sun rather, I beg your pardon, sorry, Torstar, you've done bad things too, but that's not who I meant. When the Toronto Sun publishes that, we shouldn't need their permission to talk about it. We shouldn't need their permission to comment on it. And it is a service to the public to say this isn't true, or to say it's true, but here's some context, or to say here's 10 versions of the story that have been published over the last 5 years, and here's what they all shook out to. All of those things are fine, and they're part of news gathering. I think what is worrisome is news nihilism, right? The belief that you can't trust the news. And that the truth can't be known, and that the truth is, and that expertise can't be trusted. And I don't know how you fix it, but you don't fix it through, for example, ordering platforms to carry everything that calls itself news. Like if I run a platform, I want to be free not to carry the Rebel, right? Like that should be my right. And if I run a platform and the Toronto Sun says that refugees are sacrificing goats in hotel bathrooms in refugee hotels, I want to be able to flag that, suppress it, or block it if I'm a platform. We can't tell the platforms, oh, you have to police misinformation, but also you have to carry everything that calls itself news, right? That like the answer is a plurality of places where we get news, and not stealing from people who make news by stealing their advertising dollars, payment money.
Okay, this is interesting, Cory. There's so much to talk about, but I want to bring in one of our callers. So Chris joins us from Regina. Hey, Chris.
Good afternoon. Just a few comments. So friends and I have been doing a little workaround since the Facebook ban on news. We do screenshots of news from reputable news sources and put them on Facebook. Of course, it doesn't allow people to read the whole story, but it's still. It means that there's still a presence on Facebook of stories from reputable news providers. So that's one thing that we've been doing. I thought it was also interesting. I wanted to just follow up on Stephen, one of the comments that Stephen Whitworth made. That this notion got out there that it was the government of Canada suppressing news with the introduction of Bill C-18. And I think it's important that this be noted and shouted from the rooftops, because Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives, came out and said exactly that. When Facebook made the decision to ban news, Poilievre came out and said that the Canadian government was actively involved in censoring the news. So no wonder that some people believe this lie when you get the leader of a major political party putting out that sort of misinformation. So that's, I think, really all I wanted to add to today's conversation.
Okay, Chris, thanks for calling. I appreciate it. Jacob in Saskatoon joins us. Hi, Jacob.
Hi, yeah. Where to begin? And there's not much I'm agreeing with for any of your guests or your callers today. I think that the big problem with the news, including the CBC, is that you've lost public trust because you have not been very good at being unbiased and accurate reporters of information. As an example, you keep calling the Israel-Gaza conflict a war. It's not a war. Wars require two-state actors. So it's something else entirely. There's a big thing with how much big pharma and the military-industrial complex, how much control they have over mainstream media news. Now, everybody's extolling or going after Facebook and Google for doing the things that Facebook and Google do. Nobody complained when they were doing it to all the small independent software companies and whatnot who come up with ideas and then implement them themselves. Nobody complained then, but when it starts happening to the news and costing the news some revenue, then they think, well, it's horrible.
Jacob, where do you get your news? How do you stay informed?
I try and get my news from independent online outlets that I find are credible. People like Tucker Carlson, Jimmy Dore, people that have a real commitment, I think, to truth and justice, not trying to placate the powers that be in the military-industrial complex.
Okay, well, Jacob, I appreciate your call today. Thank you.
I've got more yet, please. This Trudeau's thing here doesn't help the small business. It's basically going to help his funders. It helps Rogers and Bell. It doesn't help small independent news outlets. And it's horrible because it paves the way for link tax. And that's also going to hurt small companies and individuals. Once you have link tax implemented for this, governments are going to implement them everywhere.
Okay, we'll leave it there, Jacob. Thanks. Jacob covered a lot of ground there, Cory. And yeah, because I was going to say, it puts me in a bit of a tough spot. So you go ahead.
Yeah. So Tucker Carlson's boss, or ex-boss now, Rupert Murdoch, he's the guy who invented this, right? So this is not a weird progressive left-wing or liberal scheme. This was actually thought up. The first news bargaining codes were implemented in Europe, first in Germany and then in Spain, where they crashed and burned, and then semi-successfully implemented in Australia. And it was News Corp, right? I'm just like, it's not even like, this is not a matter of opinion, right? Like, they're not shy about saying this was our idea. So,
right.
I mean, we could talk about the merits or demerits of Tucker Carlson. I'm not a big fan. But to say that Tucker Carlson and Tucker Carlson's sort of tendency within the news is antithetical to these news bargaining codes is just factually untrue.
Right. I'll share an email from Dave, who writes, I have 5 news apps on my phone: CNN, Globe and Mail, CBC, BBC, PBS. 4 of them are free. One I subscribe to, the Globe and Mail. I also subscribe to the Walrus, Actual Canadian Journalism, snail mail to my mailbox beside my front door. I get my news from the news apps and TV news programs. Social media is entertainment mostly, and news posted there from all kinds of news sources. One must be careful what you trust. Simple if you understand good journalism. Cory, do you want to talk about some of the prescriptions and kind of the now what? We don't have a ton of time.
Sure.
We could keep you for another hour, but give us a sense of now what.
Okay, let's start with what we could do about ads and the 51 cents out of every ad dollar that's being siphoned off by big tech. So, two companies control almost all the display advertising. A company called Facebook that pretends it's called Meta, and a company called Google that pretends it's called Alphabet. And both of those companies are vertically integrated. So, the way that those ads work is if you're a publisher, you log into something called a supply side platform, right? And you say, I have got some space on my website where I can put ads. And if you're an advertiser, you log into something called a demand side platform, and you say, I would like to advertise on some websites that have space. And these are my parameters. I want 18 to 34-year-old men, children in Saskatoon who own Xboxes and have been researching gonorrhea, right? I want to advertise to those people. And then the demand side platform and the sell side platform, they show up together in a or the publisher side platform rather, they show up together in an online marketplace where their software agents bid together to figure out what ad is going to be put there. So you sometimes land on these like chummy terrible websites that have got like a million low quality ads, and it takes forever for the page to load. That's the surveillance lag. That's like all those auctions taking place to put ads there. So Facebook and Google, they each own a demand side, a sell side, and a marketplace. And they have cooked the deal so that if you're using any one of those, you have to use all of them. Moreover, they're also publishers and they're also advertisers. So this is like if you went to get a divorce, right? And your soon to be ex-husband and you were both being represented by the same lawyer who was also the judge and was also trying to match with both of you on Tinder. And then when the divorce was finalized, you discovered that they owned the house. Right. And so the fact that these two companies are getting 51 cents out of every ad dollar is not mysterious. It's just corrupt. And there are lots of people who want to do something about this. And it's not a leftist agenda. So in the United States, there's a bill called the America Act. For better or for worse, the U.S. Doesn't number their bills. They have these people with extremely expensive political science degrees working in congressional offices spend hours coming up with acronyms that turn into things like the America Act. So in the America Act will break up Facebook and Google. It says you've got to pick a lane. You can be the sell side platform, the buy side platform, or you can be the marketplace. And the two main sponsors of that bill are Elizabeth Warren and Ted Cruz. Right. This is not an evil leftist plot. Right. So
No,
that's a thing
clear.
we could have done in Canada. Right. We could have said that.
Right. What have you done, Cory? I am actually just curious about you personally, because you're not on Facebook, are you?
No, I'm a Zucker vegan. I don't have Facebook or WhatsApp or Facebook Live or an Oculus Rift or, any of their other stuff.
You have Twitter, though?
Oh, I do have Twitter. Yeah, I'm sort of stuck there. I'm path dependent because, I publish independent journalism. I have a newsletter called Pluralistic that is the continuation of now nearly a quarter century of online writing. And
what about TikTok? Do you do TikTok? TikTok?
No. So here's my thing. I made the mistake of getting onto a platform that looked open enough, like Twitter, because you could link to it from the public web. And I thought, if they try to trap me, I'll be okay. I'll be able to wriggle out. I'm not. It's become a critical place for me. So from now on, as George Bush told us, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, we don't get fooled again. From now on, I am only working on like new platforms that are open. Right. So Mastodon is basically it. I know it's niche and weird, but I would rather something I'm 52 years old now. I'd rather something that fails gracefully than works well. I've been the crash test dummy for a lot of things. And the cool thing about Mastodon, you got to pick a server. Everyone's like, oh, it's so complicated. I got to pick a server. It's like you have to pick an email server as well. And when you get on email, it's the same thing. But the cool thing about Mastodon is if you don't like the server you're on, you just click one link and you can change servers.
All right, Cory.
So it's really good.
We're going to get cut off. It's so good talking to you. Cory Doctorow, folks.
Yeah, nice talking with you too.
About social media.